Welcome back to The Storytelling Dad. This is where we share stories that reach deep into the heart stories of fathers, of families, and of love, tested by silence and time. If you're new here, take a moment to subscribe and join us, because every story we tell might remind you of your own. Tonight's story is called, I Wasn't Invited to My Son's Birthday, So I Left a Gift on the Porch. He had been waiting for weeks, quietly circling the date on his old kitchen calendar. His son's birthday, a small number written in red ink. A reminder that even though he no longer lived under the same roof, some bonds were meant to outlast divorce papers and new marriages. But as the day approached, no call came. No card, no text message, no invitation slipped under the door, just silent. The boy's mother had moved on years ago, remarried, and in that new household, there was a new woman in charge, a stepmother who had made it clear, it's better if you don't come, it will only confuse things. So the father stayed home, staring at that red circle on the calendar. He thought about the way his son used to look at him when he was little, eyes wide as candles were lit on a homemade cake. Back then, birthdays meant laughter and hugs, even if the balloons were cheap and the presents modest. Now, he was left with nothing but the echo of those memories and the quiet ache of being uninvited to the most important day in his son's year. Yet, as he sat there, something began to form in his mind, a decision, small but certain. If he couldn't be inside the celebration, he would still find a way to be near. Because love, he thought, does not need permission. It only needs a chance to be seen. The day before the party, he drove past the house where balloons were already tied to the mailbox. From the street, he could see movement inside decorations being strung up, laughter spilling out through the windows. He slowed the car, hoping for even the smallest sign. Maybe his son would run outside, maybe someone would wave him in, but the curtains shifted and then closed. His phone stayed quiet. He scrolled through messages just to be sure, but there was nothing. No invitation, no reminder of the boy he had raised through scraped knees, bedtime stories, and science fair projects. Only silence. The stepmother had made her stance clear years ago. She wanted clean lines, her family, her rules. To her, he was a shadow of the past. Someone best left outside the frame of their carefully curated new life. He parked across the street for a few minutes longer, staring at the driveway where cars would soon line up, friends and family carrying gifts wrapped in bright paper. None of them would notice the man sitting quietly in an old pickup, gripping the steering wheel hard enough for his knuckles to turn white. Inside that house, his son was preparing to blow out candles. Outside, he was left to wonder if the boy even knew he was missing. And still, a thought pulsed in his chest, soft but unyielding. I may not be welcome, but I will not be absent. That night, as he sat in his quiet kitchen, the silence pressed in heavier than the winter cold. He pulled an old shoebox from the closet, the one that held fragments of another life, a life where he was still dad in the fullest sense. Inside were photos curled at the edges, a boy with frosting on his cheeks, blowing out candles on a lopsided cake, balloons taped to walls, his own hands visible in the background, holding the cake steady, making sure the flames didn't go out too soon. He remembered staying up late the night before those birthdays, working with what little he had. Sometimes it was a store-bought toy on clearance. Other times it was something he made himself, an airplane carved from wood scraps, a slingshot, a picture frame for a school photo. His son never seemed to mind. Back then, joy wasn't measured in dollars, but in the way his boy's arms wrapped around him, fierce and certain. He could still hear the laughter echoing, feel the small hands tugging at his sleeve, begging him to play. And for a moment, as the memories played like film reels across his tired eyes, he allowed himself to believe it could still be that way. But when he set the photos back into the box, reality was waiting for him, sharp and unyielding. Tomorrow, there would be a party, filled with laughter and lights, and he would not be part of it. Yet beneath the ache, something glimmered, the certainty that love didn't need a chair at the table to survive. She had been in his son's life for only a few years, yet her presence loomed like a locked door. From the very beginning, the stepmother had drawn boundaries, not with shouts, but with quiet, calculated firmness. She attended the school meetings in his place. She signed the permission slips. She positioned herself beside the boy at every photo, as though rewriting history frame by frame. Whenever he tried to call, the conversations grew shorter. Sometimes his son's voice would lower, glancing over his shoulder, as if someone was standing just a step away, listening. Other times, the call would not be answered at all. At first, he told himself it was natural families shift, people adjust. But soon, the distance felt deliberate, the wall higher with every season. Now, on the eve of his son's birthday, that wall had become impenetrable. She had sent the message without words, "You don't belong here." He pictured the party inside that brightly lit house, children laughing, candles glowing, gifts piled high. And somewhere among the laughter, his boy, smiling for pictures, unaware of the man sitting just outside the frame. The wall was invisible, yet it was everywhere. And though it broke his heart, he understood one thing. If he could not go through it, he would have to find a way around it. The night before the birthday, the house felt colder than usual. He left the kitchen light on, though he didn't need it, just to chase away the shadows pressing against the walls. On the table sat a single plate with untouched dinner. He had cooked out of habit, but the food cooled quickly and appetite never came. Instead, he poured himself a cup of coffee and walked to the living room where an old photo frame rested on the shelf. His son, at 6 years old, grinning with 2 missing teeth, a paper crown perched sideways on his head. It was the kind of smile that had once carried him through the longest days of work, the kind of smile that whispered, "You matter, Dad." Now, that photo stared back at him like a ghost. He lowered himself onto the couch, the springs creaking beneath his weight. For a long while, he simply sat, hands folded, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He imagined the house across town, already filling with laughter, balloons bobbing against the ceiling, children's voices echoing through the hall. His chest tightened, not with anger, not even jealousy, but with a heavy sadness, the kind that doesn't shout, only lingers. On the coffee table lay a small wooden box of tools. He reached for it absent-mindedly, running a calloused thumb over the worn edges. Something stirred in him, quiet but certain. He could not be part of the party, but maybe, just maybe, he could still give his son something that carried his heart. The night stretched long, but the thought stayed with him. The old shed out back had not seen much use in years. Dust lay heavy on the workbench, cobwebs stretched across the corners. But that night, it became a sanctuary. He flicked on a single bulb overhead, its yellow light flickering before it settled into a steady glow. In that glow, his tools waited, scarred, rusted, but faithful. A hammer, a plane, a box of nails, nearly empty. And on the floor, stacked in a forgotten pile, the remnants of old timber scraps. He bent down, gathering the pieces into his arms. They weren't much, crooked, rough, chipped at the edges, but to him, they held possibility. With careful hands, he laid them out on the bench, arranging them as if solving a puzzle only he could see. He worked slowly at first, his fingers stiff from age and years of labor. Then, as memory returned, the rhythm did too. Sanding, shaping, cutting with care. The wood released a scent that carried him back to younger days, when small hands clapped in delight at wooden toys he had once made. As the hours stretched deep into night, his body ached, but his spirit found purpose. Every cut, every stroke of the plane was more than carpentry, it was confession. A father's love carved into something his son could hold. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the sky, a shape had begun to emerge. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Something only his hands and his heart could create. And for the first time in many days, he allowed himself a small smile.
The workshop filled with the steady rhythm of his hands, but as the night deepened, so did his doubts. He paused, holding the unfinished piece in front of him. The wood was uneven, the corners rough. It was no store-bought gadget, no shiny toy that his son's friends would brag about. It was simple, maybe too simple. What if he laughs? The thought pressed into him. What if he looks at this and sees only proof that I have nothing to give? For a moment, the fear nearly stopped him. His chest tightened, the same way it had years ago when he first dropped his son off at school and worried he wouldn't fit in. He had always feared the world might convince his boy that love without money was less than love at all. His eyes drifted to the photo, still tucked in the corner of the bench, his son at 8 years old, clutching a crooked wooden airplane. The wings had been uneven, the paint chipped, but the boy had flown it around the yard with pure joy, as though it were the greatest treasure. The memory steadied his hands. He picked up the plane again, not the old toy, but the new piece forming under his fingers. He smoothed another edge, pressed another nail into place. This wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. It was about leaving a piece of himself behind, something his son could hold and say, "Dad made this for me." The fear didn't vanish, but it quieted. And in its place rose a truth he could not deny. Love was not measured by applause or approval. It was measured by the willingness to keep giving, even when no one was watching. The gift began to take shape not just in wood, but in memory, carved line by line. The morning sun rose crisp and bright, spilling light across the small shed where his gift rested. He held it carefully in his hands, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with a piece of string. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't shiny or loud, but it was his heart, bound in wood and thread. He stood by the mirror, adjusting the collar of his shirt. The fabric was worn, the colors faded, but he smoothed it down anyway. Today was his son's birthday. Even if he wasn't allowed inside, he wanted to look like a father who had shown up. Driving across town, he watched the world preparing for celebration cars parked along the streets, balloons drifting lazily above mailboxes, neighbors carrying brightly wrapped boxes under their arms. The sound of laughter carried through the air long before he reached the familiar house. When he pulled up to the curb, his chest tightened. Children ran in the yard, voices lifted in joy. Through the open window, he heard music and chatter, a party in full bloom. But none of it was for him. He sat for a long moment, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the house that once had been filled with his son's laughter, a place where he used to belong. Finally, he stepped out, the package clutched in his hand. His legs felt heavy, each step slow, deliberate. He could almost see through the wall, see his son at the center of it all, candles glowing, eyes bright. Yet here he was, standing on the outside, with only the porch to welcome him. He lowered the gift gently at the door, the string bow crooked but steady. Then he took one last look, a soft whisper escaping his lips. "Happy birthday, son." And with that, he turned to walk away. The street was alive with music and laughter, but on the porch it was quiet. He stood there for a moment, the package heavy in his hand, though it weighed almost nothing. The brown paper crinkled softly under his fingers, the bow of string slightly uneven. He lowered it gently to the ground, careful as if he were placing something fragile, because to him, it was. He straightened up, looking at the door. Just a thin barrier of wood between him and the life he once shared. On the other side, his son's laughter rose with the others, muffled but clear enough to twist his heart. He wanted to knock, just once, to hear his son's footsteps rushing toward him, to see the boy's face light up the way it used to, but his hand stayed at his side. Instead, he whispered again, almost like a prayer, "Happy birthday." Then he stepped back. The camera above the door blinked silently, its red light glowing in the corner. He never noticed. He turned, shoulders heavy, and began the long walk back down the driveway. Each step carried the sound of celebration further away, until all that remained was the echo of his own quiet goodbye. The porch light flickered softly as he walked away, unaware of the unblinking eye above him. The small security camera, mounted in the corner, captured everything. The way he bent down slowly, as though placing something sacred on the ground, the hesitation in his shoulders, the pause before he whispered a few words no one could hear, the way he turned, straightened his jacket, and walked into the distance, never once looking back. Inside the house, the laughter drowned out the quiet moment unfolding at the door. Children's voices rose higher. The clinking of glasses filled the air. No one noticed the blinking red light, recording silently, faithfully. The gift sat there on the porch, alone yet waiting. A small bundle of wood and love, wrapped in plain paper, unseen by the world but preserved by the camera's gaze. Hours later, when the house had emptied and balloons sagged against the floor, that recording would tell a truth no one had intended to show. The party was over. Balloons lay deflated on the carpet, plates stacked high with crumbs of cake, and the house quieted as the guests drove away. In the midst of the quiet, the boy wandered toward the front door. Something on the porch caught his eye. He pushed the door open and saw a small package resting against the step, wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with a crooked piece of string. He bent down, fingertips brushing over the surface, puzzled. It wasn't shiny like the gifts stacked inside. It wasn't wrapped in colorful bows or glitter. But there was something about it, something that made him pause. He picked it up carefully, holding it against his chest as if it might break. "Who left this?" he whispered, but no one answered. Carrying it back inside, he sat on the floor, peeling away the brown paper. Beneath it, wood glistened in the lamplight. Smooth edges carved with care, lines etched not by machines but by hands. His breath caught for a moment. It felt familiar, though he could not yet place why. Later that evening, curiosity led the boy to the family security system. He had seen his stepmother scroll through the recordings before, laughing at neighborhood cats or delivery men dropping packages. Now, with the strange gift still in his lap, he clicked through the footage, fast-forwarding past the party. Then he froze. On the screen, under the dim porch light, a figure appeared. It was a man in a worn jacket, shoulders slightly hunched, clutching the brown paper package in his hands. The boy leaned closer, heart thudding. The man bent down carefully, placing the gift on the step. His lips moved words too soft for the microphone to catch, but the boy recognized the shape of them. "Happy birthday." It was his father. The camera showed him straightening, glancing once at the door, then turning and walking away. The glow of the porch light followed him until the shadows swallowed him whole. The boy's throat tightened. His small hands gripped the edges of the laptop, tears rising faster than he could stop them. The gift was not just wood, it was love, left quietly at the doorstep. And he had almost missed it. The boy sat frozen in front of the screen, his breath shallow, his eyes wide. The recording played again, looping silently, his father bending down, his father whispering words, his father walking away alone into the night. Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't look away. He pressed a hand against the monitor, as if he could somehow reach through it, stop the man from leaving, call him back to the door. The gift in his lap felt heavier now. He turned it over, tracing the lines of the wood with trembling fingers. Each groove, each imperfect edge, spoke louder than any store-bought toy. "This is him," he whispered to himself. "This is Dad." The walls of the house felt suddenly wrong, too bright, too decorated, too full of people who hadn't noticed what really mattered. He clutched the wooden gift against his chest, holding it the way he used to cling to his father's shirt when he was small. And for the first time in a long time, he cried not out of shame, not out of anger, but out of longing. He missed his father, and he knew now, with a certainty that burned through every tear, his father had never stopped being there. The boy couldn't sit still anymore. The wooden gift pressed against his chest as if urging him forward, whispering, "Go to him." He wiped his tears, grabbed his jacket, and slipped out the front door. The night air was cool, filled with the faint echo of laughter still drifting from inside. But he didn't look back. His feet carried him down the street, faster with every step. He knew where to go. He remembered the small house, the one with the squeaky porch swing and the light that always seemed to stay on too late. When he arrived, he saw it. A single lamp glowing in the window. A shadow moved slowly inside, a familiar silhouette hunched over at the table. He pushed the door open, heart pounding. "Dad." The man looked up, startled, eyes wide, as if the voice had come from a dream. Before he could speak, the boy crossed the room and wrapped his arms around him, clutching the wooden gift between them. "I saw you," the boy whispered, voice breaking. "I saw you on the camera. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry they didn't let you in." The father's arms trembled as they came around his son, holding him tight, afraid that if he let go, the moment would vanish. "You're here now," he said softly. "That's all that matters." And in that embrace, the distance of years dissolved. The party, the decorations, the walls that had been built between them, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, father and son stood together again, their hearts beating in the same rhythm. They sat together at the worn kitchen table, the wooden gift resting between them like a bridge. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was no longer heavy, it was warm, filled with the presence of something unbroken. The father traced his fingers over the carved edges, then looked into his son's eyes. "Money can buy many things," he said softly, "but it cannot buy love. It cannot buy the nights I stayed up with you when you were sick. It cannot buy the moments when you called me your hero." The boy's eyes filled again, and he reached for his father's hand. "This," the man continued, lifting the gift gently, "isn't perfect, but it's made with my hands, with my heart. That's what lasts. Long after the balloons pop, long after the cake is gone, what lasts is love." The boy nodded, clutching the wooden gift to his chest once more. "I understand now, Dad," he whispered. "I understand." And in that small kitchen, with nothing but a flickering light above them, a father passed down the greatest inheritance he had. Not wealth, not possessions, but a truth carved deep into his son's heart. Days passed, but the wooden gift never left the boy's side. It wasn't just a toy anymore, it was a reminder, a symbol, a piece of his father's love carved into something he could hold. At school, when friends asked about his birthday, he didn't boast about the party or the cake. Instead, he showed them the gift. His voice carried pride now, not shame. "This," he said, "is from my dad." The story spread, first among classmates, then neighbors, then the wider community. People were moved not by wealth or grandeur, but by the quiet resilience of a father who refused to let love be shut out. And in the small home where father and son sat together once more, laughter began to return. Not loud, not constant, but real. The father looked at his son and knew one thing for certain: true love doesn't need an invitation. It finds its way, even through silence, even through closed doors. Because love, when given freely, will always be remembered.